Hey everybody, welcome to Decentral Lens. I am host Blue Toshi and this is Disco, and we are super excited. We have a very special guest today and someone who I cut my teeth on in the crypto space since my days in 2015. He's been around way longer. I'd like to welcome to the show Erik Voorhees. Erik, thank you for coming and welcome. We are so excited to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Awesome. So today we're going to talk AI, but how AI ties into crypto. Erik, obviously, you're one of the founders of Venice.ai, which the second I heard about it, I think on McCormack's show, like the second I did it, I went in, I used it. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. Like and it's private, it's secure, and there's no tracking, and I immediately switched. I got rid of OpenAI and even got rid of Midjourney for images because I know with open source it's a work in progress, but I feel like Venice just, you guys hit the ground running, and I love your product. So we reached out to Tiana, your COO, who was just awesome, gave me some tips on how to better use it, and I'm just blown away, and I love using it. So having you on the show is just an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Sure, sure.
So for those who don't know Erik, and that's probably very few of you, I probably have to introduce myself more than I do him, but you founded Satoshi Dice back in the day. You did Shapeshift. You founded that, but I think as huge as those are, I think some of your biggest contributions to the space, honestly, are your patience and how you've educated people in the Bitcoin space about self-sovereignty, about your right for privacy, obviously big on the Fourth and First Amendments. And, I've learned a ton from it as I've gone deep down so many rabbit holes. So I appreciate having you here. The Peter Schiff debates, I know we were talking on the pre-show, but those debates were great because you're very eloquent at saying what a lot of us think and know in our hearts, that we've been doing this so long, but you're so good at being eloquent and patient with people when even sometimes you're getting attacked with the SBF interviews. So I appreciate you in doing that. I guess my first question for you would be, you've done so much in the space, you don't need an introduction. What are you most proud of, and what would you want people, before we get too much into AI, on kind of the Bitcoin side in your evolution, what are you most proud of, and what you do, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I got into this crypto world for very explicitly ideological reasons. And I think what I'm most proud of seeing over these, like, I don't know, 14 years or so is that it's all like working. Like it's actually growing and taking over the world. And to see something that you get interested in for reasons of principle, but then they start changing the world and you get to be there along for that ride and like help contribute in little ways to it, is very rewarding. Uh, and I think a lot of people have to like decide in their life whether they want to spend their time doing something that is deeply meaningful to them, or something which maybe they can make a lot of money at or have like a big impact on, or like have to focus on a career in some way. And in the crypto world, to be able to do both of those things in one timeline is very special. So I'm just glad that this stuff is working, and I think the energy that's building from it and the consequences from it are going to be very momentous.
Yeah, what blows me away is that, you know, so many people have come into this space, and some of the people who have been the most eloquent at saying why so many of these aspects, privacy, self-sovereignty, are so important. And a lot of them eventually, I feel like they they're public facing, they get in front of the camera, they do social media and stuff, and they kind of speak their piece, but then folks like Trace and Andreas, some of these people that a lot of us learn from, eventually kind of go back and then a new generation comes. But you've just kept evolving in this space and kept going. And, there's obviously natural ties to AI and crypto, but what's kept you now that you're saying like, well, we've kind of made it now, and I know that's only certain aspects. We have a long way to go probably in others, especially with AI, but what keeps you going and what keeps you motivated going in this space?
The motivation comes from feeling like I am fighting a worthy fight. And a worthy fight means, like a strong adversary and requiring sacrifice and bravery and ultimately like seeing victory through those efforts. Uh, I I really think that fiat currency and like the banking system, which emerges out of it at the behest of the state, is really close to the root of many of the world's problems. Certainly, not all the problems in the world are caused by fiat, but I think it contributes to many of them, and it's a very undiagnosed problem. So to to feel like I understand that problem and to like be able to hack at that root and teach others about the importance of it, and then to now see like millions of people hacking at that root is really fulfilling. And certainly as the industry grows and expands, it just becomes more and more opportunity. Like it's so much more diverse now and complicated, and I feel inspired every day just by the dynamism that's going on. It's never gotten like more dull or boring. It's always getting more wild and crazy and surreal.
Yeah, absolutely. I hate to put like a finish line somewhere. Like, do you think we're there, or is there always a next fight to fight, and a next thing where citizens and Bitcoin citizens and really global citizens stand up to governments and oppression and freedom and privacy? Like, do you think we've made a ton of progress, and do we have a long way to go?
Yeah, both are true. We've made a ton of progress and we have a long way to go. Like we're nowhere close to the final battles at all. Um, Most of the quote unquote serious financial professional world uh, doesn't think of Bitcoin as anything more than a speculative instrument, and even those who seem a little more understanding of it, right, like the Larry Finks of the world, like it's a product for them to make money off of. I don't think he has any particular care about it as an asset class or what it actually means, and I don't think people like that actually believe the consequence that inspires the ideologues, which is we're not doing this so that we have like a fun new instrument to gamble on. We're doing this because we're actually trying to change how money for the entire planet works at the foundational level. Um, I really don't think many people in professional finance like understand that mission or give it any credibility, and so that ignorance is still our advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like you see that first and foremost whenever markets even go down a little. It's funny, we and our whole audience obviously sees Bitcoin as the run to safety base asset, but we're now competing against Wall Street and these big whales who see it as the end of the tail risk on asset. So there's this, I always tell Disco, like, it's great because you know when to buy the dip because the dip is so obvious. It's like telegraphed because there's so much more money that comes in, and then the folks who believe get in there. Like, do you think Bitcoin, before we transition to AI, because there's so many similar, I feel like there's so many parallel fights in there. Do you think Bitcoin has won the fight, or now is it, yeah, Bitcoin's winning, you can't stop it, but now we citizenry have to make sure we're not taxed out of our profits and our holdings and stuff like that?
I don't know. I think like the battle will get interesting and more scary as soon as the next financial crisis happens, and that could be in 6 months or in 5 years or 10 years. But that's really going to be where the game theory of this plays out. The world hasn't gone through like a global financial apocalypse, currency crisis among major currencies when a credibly neutral, decentralized alternative has existed. And in its early days, Bitcoin wasn't ready for that. Arguably, it's not ready today. I don't know. But it will get there eventually. And so everyone building the tools and systems for this technology, like hopefully they realize that they're kind of in a race against time, because the time for crypto to like really shine will happen at a moment that is not of our choosing. Let's just say.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like you're saying we haven't had our 2008 was our dress rehearsal, but the market was so manipulated that they bailed out the fiat banks and the kind of the cabal there. It sounds like you're saying until we have, when they've run out of even those bag of tricks, when we have our fourth turning, like that's when, like when the rubber hits the road, like is Bitcoin going to hold up? Which I think it will. I think it'll go down a lot. Like one of my proudest moments was 2020 March when COVID, all the panic first happened, and Bitcoin, I think for like 6 hours went below 5,000 in that little dip. And I bought a couple. I was like, when you have that conviction, you just know, you're like, why is everyone panicking? Like, am I the only one who sees this? Like, it's not going to zero. We're going to keep buying till it goes down. But no, that's super cool. So let's get into AI and kind of transition there. There's so many parallels, in Bitcoin we say, I don't know who originated this. It's probably you or a close friend of yours, but not your keys, not your crypto. I don't know if that was Andreas or someone. What would be, now that I'm into Venice, to me, it seems so obvious for, the group of people that we run with. Obviously we're heavily in the ordinals rune space, but we're obviously heavy in the Bitcoin space as well. Have you thought of I hate to say catchphrase, but some way to simply, like in one sentence, like capture the minds of fellow Bitcoiners and crypto holders, the AI equivalent of not your keys, not your crypto, like not your privacy or not open source and not, not surveillance, you dipshit,
No, I don't have a good slogan like that yet for the AI world, but we need one. The not your keys, not your coins is such a great one. And still, even though that statement is so pithy and clear, most people, of course, don't hold the crypto on their own keys. But the goal is I don't think that everyone in the world has everything in self-custody. That would be inefficient and impractical. What's important is that people understand the two different paradigms and move between them as appropriate. And most people are going to have some kind of mix of self-custody and third party. But it's that mix that's important, and it's the ability to exit the custodians when they misbehave that is so important, right? Like if custodians were all highly trustworthy, the need to store your own keys is less. But if they start abusing that privilege for any number of reasons, the ability to opt out and exit is the ultimate check on that. That's what makes crypto so powerful. And I mean, in the AI world, I think the issue is that people aren't looking into the future very far. People have started becoming fascinated by these chatbots, which are amazing new tools of entertainment and productivity and right. Research and creative thinking. Truly amazing new tools with this stuff. But the conversations that people have are all being tracked and all being centralized. And it does not take a very creative mind to consider that in the near future, all those conversations are being analyzed for various forms of wrongthink, right? Imagine if ChatGPT had existed back during COVID, and all sorts of people were asking ChatGPT about information about the vaccine and masks and everything. ChatGPT would have absolutely censored the answers some of which would be overt, some of which would be a little more subtle. But all the people who expressed, let's say, skepticism about the safety of the vaccine, just expressed skepticism, all of those people are tracked in the OpenAI database. So a government that wants to know, like all the people who aren't in line with the vaccination program, all they have to do is send a subpoena, and they will get the records of everyone and their conversation history. And it's just so clearly dangerous for that kind of thing to go on in the world, and there has to be alternatives. There has to be,
Yeah.
the self custody or the there an AI alternative that allows people the sovereignty over their own information and content.
In a way, it's almost like self custody of your own thoughts. And that's what really gets me just,
Yes.
hyper alert to that. It's like if you're engaging with one of these tools and you're expanding and going down kind of the thought road to this place, to have that documented and or stored and or be able to be kind of categorized and co-op, that's just, I mean, it's all the things that we always feared in the future. And, you were early, obviously, on crypto, and I think you're early on this. And I think this is like the most important rallying cry. And I agree with Blue, like it'd be great to come up with something that can kind of push it out there. And I do think it's something about like your thoughts. Like you need to own your thoughts. And that's what really kind of blows my mind to think about where that could head.
Well, it's like pre-crime, and I'm
Yeah.
amazed how I think being in the crypto space, we've learned so much about how money works, but also, transforming to AI, we realize how manipulative, and if mainstream media or whatever term you want to use repeats something over and over and just kind of like slowly fades out and gaslights alternate opinions and views, which often are even people on the streets like, here's what's actually happening, that gets filtered out. I'm amazed at how quickly that we saw in COVID how people can kind of group think into one area. And Eric, it sounds like you're saying an AI is almost the capstone to keep that control. TV, when we all grew up, it was 3 channels. It was super easy to control the news and the narrative. And then it went to cable, and then maybe it got a little harder, but I'm sure they've got a 3-letter agency person at pretty much every channel there, approving and denying certain critical things. But now with the internet, they had to learn to rally and corral that, and they certainly have. I mean, look at the elections and stuff, and now you just wonder, like, it's so hard to find the right, or it's so hard to get information, try and distill it all through and figure out what's truth and not. It's frankly exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's bad enough that, like, as the internet emerged, the main search engine being Google is this centralized thing, and Google did such a good job as a business of like seizing other verticals, and they got Gmail and they got YouTube and all these different properties, to the degree that like Google as a company can control what is perceived as true in society to a large degree. Um, and we should assume that these AI providers have the potential to get far larger than a Google,
Wow.
because what they're doing is much more powerful and has just gotten started. And so let's not make that same mistake again. And I think especially when you consider that we're talking about AIs, it's not just that like your conversations would be held and tracked so that a human wanting to spy on you could go look at it. You have to combine it with the risk of the AI itself analyzing the things that are happening within its system. Even the people who are like very scared that AI will become sentient and try to wipe out humanity, those people should definitely not want these like closed central repositories, because if ChatGPT became sentient and has all this information about how 500 million people have used it, what do you think it needs to do in order to like mess with those people's lives? It already has all the information that it needs, and you don't need any kind of crazy dystopian sci-fi scenario for the power to get abused in these situations.
Yeah, and what amazes me is how quickly this crackdown happened, right? So, you get OpenAI 3.5, and that's when obviously they've been working on it well before that, but that was the one where everyone was like, that was kind of the holy shit moment, right? And that was last year. And I feel like with the election coming up this year, it was probably right around the time that I signed up for Venice, like OpenAI, maybe it was when it went to 4 or ChatGPT went to 4.0 or whatever the one was. Now the amount of censorship, it's almost like it happened overnight. And I think I heard, Eric, you made a great point somewhere else that it starts like fine, but they can switch those controls on a dime, and we're already seeing that.
Well, and it's not just the like nefarious actor who wants to control information. Like those people obviously exist, and that's very dangerous. Um, but there's also the much more benign kind of situations where like you want to avoid offending some certain group. So you type in a set of rules because you are trying to avoid offending a certain group, right? And maybe you succeed in that or not. But those rules then cause cascading changes elsewhere in other types of answers, some of which may be easier or harder to spot. But you end up getting like an AI system which is not just the machine intelligence of a statistical language calculator, but it's that going through this weird unknown amalgam of human bias and censorship and restriction, and you prevent people from like having a true understanding of reality. They see the world through this like mixed glass of all the people who wanted their influence on the outcome. And maybe all of those people had good intentions, right? We don't need to assume any of those people were evil. But if you care about like the honest and accurate and objective pursuit of truth, you have to be able to know the tools that you're using. And that's why like open source AI, I think is so critical because these are very powerful systems. And if it's a black box to everyone in the world, except for a few people at a centralized company and the government agents that oversee them, um, dangerous.
Yeah, it's I've been learning and struggling through this notion of like out of the elements of kind of spying or censorship, what's kind of more important, and I think they just work so side by side in what we need to kind of rally to protect. So you see those the elements of, is it the bias or is it the spying and the privacy, and it's almost like they kind of merge into like this super important one factor that ties to the whole meaning or need to really explore decentralized options.
Yeah. And like to drive this point home very easily and clearly. So at least in the US, like many people are either vehemently opposed to Trump or vehemently opposed to Biden slash Harris. If you asked either of those people, post the election, if your enemy is the one who is running the government, do you want that enemy to be able to influence or control the flow of information in society? Right? Like ask any Democrat if they want Trump to have the power of controlling the flow of information in society, and they would say immediately, of course not. That's horribly dangerous. And you could ask any Republican the same of the Biden Harris administration, and you'd get the same answer. And so the point here is that if you care about civilization being healthy, you do not want a situation in which any central party can control something as important as like the flow of information and knowledge. And it's that kind of philosophy that puts this, I think, very close to the crypto world, where those of us in crypto are like, yes, we don't want any central party in the world having control over something so important as people's value and trade and exchange. That's like too core to humans to ever let anyone control it. And it's sad that we have permitted this like central banking fiat centralization to occur. Let's fight that. Now that AI has emerged, we should be really careful not to permit the same kind of dangerous centralization to exist there.
And even with some of the groups that are put together now, like they're not putting, it doesn't seem like they're putting advocates of decentralization in the conversation. It feels like it's almost a, copy and paste of the Web 2 people that were kind of ahead of it with social media, ahead of the government on it, and kind of set the rules. So it almost feels like we need to get really proactive to avoid the same trap happening.
Yeah. We can't assume the centralized AI companies will be like handling this. The fact that OpenAI added an ex-NSA board member to their board, or an ex-NSA director to their board, and then they like bragged about it as if that was a win, right? So they don't even see that as a bad call or a dangerous thing. They saw that as like, oh, they're taking national security safety seriously. So yeah, it's a dangerous and confusing time for this stuff. And with Venice, we're just trying to provide an alternative that can become increasingly decentralized and thus never captured by any central party.
Yeah, it's to your point, Erik and Disco. Elon had a great tweet the other day. He was like, when you watch Star Wars, you were for the resistance. When you watch Hunger Games, you're for the resistance. When you watch Dune, you're for the resistance. And then he's like, why don't you see what's going on? Like in real life, you're not for the resistance. And it's just like, folks, wake up. Erik, what would you say right now are the most stark examples of AI already starting to kind of, as Disco said, like kind of control your mind in this think? I mean, as you're talking, I'm just going to show, this is more comical than anything, but I typed in OpenAI a little while ago for a picture of Donald Trump with an ice cream cone, holding an ice cream cone. That's behind Erik here. I could probably scroll and you could probably see it. But I got, here are sketches of a man with a distinctive blonde hair holding an ice cream cone. Because that's exactly what I wanted. Some handsome, kooky 28-year-old with a scruffy beard holding an ice cream cone. So obviously this is a very lighthearted example of the censorship. And like I said, I think because of the election, like had I typed this in maybe March or April, I would have gotten Donald Trump holding an ice cream cone. It literally one day was just on Claude and on OpenAI. It was just like gone. And they were all the closed source platforms having pictures of politicians, especially the elected ones. But I don't think I could do Elizabeth Warren. I couldn't do any of the senators doing just random benign things. Like, the clampdown privately was everywhere, but what are the biggest ones that you've kind of seen?
That example is the one I always lead with. Not that ice cream in particular.
Trump holding an ice cream cone.
That you can go to the leading AI image generators, ChatGPT or Midjourney, and just ask a very benign thing like picture of Donald Trump. There's nothing wrong with that question, right? Like as a pursuit of intellectual inquiry or aesthetic desire, like there's nothing about that anyone should have a problem with. Why in the world can't you generate these images from the AI? And it's because there are people, right? It's not like the AI can't do it. There's people that have said, do not create pictures of politicians. And if that doesn't chill you a little bit, then you really aren't thinking very much about like how the future will unfold. You don't want topics. A society that removes topics from conversation, that you can't even discuss it, is a society that ends up in very bad places. And so that example is a really good one. Another one, like after the assassination attempt on Trump, I don't know if it's still true, but for at least a week after that happened, if you asked Claude from Anthropic or ChatGPT if Trump was assassinated, it would, or if like tell me about the assassination attempt, it would give you this very vague answer like, we don't really have information on that. Please consult your local or your national whatever for the source. And obviously it would know about those things. It just was told not to comment on it because it was a controversial topic. And as people move to AI instead of search, which I do myself, like I've started using AI instead of search for many things because it's just faster and you don't get all the ads and everything. It becomes, that's where people search for what's happening in the world. And when entire topics just like get removed,
cease to exist.
Yeah, you know, and it can happen about an event that's going on now. You can imagine, you know, some kind of, well, you can imagine an AI system in China is certainly not going to tell you anything about Tiananmen Square, right? Like that's an obvious one. And you. So anyway, the problem's been explained enough here, I think. But that's it's scary. It's scary to me. And thankfully, there are solutions, right? Like the open source, decentralized providers are the solution. They work now, and they are in the realm of the same quality in terms of image and text models as the closed source alternatives.
How do you, as we transition to Venice.ai as the solution to this that I'm using and just loving, how do you make sure that, you know, you don't get what is the government when they take you down? Is that not a DDoS attack, but when they basically seize your website? Like, how are you handling the decentralization of AI to make sure that it cannot be stopped?
Great question. The most important thing that needs to continue in order for AI to not become fully centralized is the predominance of open source models. The models are really like the key thing. If you have a world where frontier open source models exist, you have a healthy AI world, and basically everything else flows from that. You don't need to be too worried about the state of AI if there are at least frontier open source models. The leading one today is, of course, Llama 3.1 from Meta.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And if you have that, then the model itself can be examined. You can see what the weights are. You can understand like how it was trained and what biases exist in it and what data sets it's using. And like, you can understand these things and you can change it. You can tweak it. You can make versions of it. Like it's adaptable and it can be, no one's controlling that. Like once Llama 3.1 was released, it goes in all sorts of different directions and people change it and improve it or make it worse in their own variations and colors. And like, that is great decentralization. So that's really the most important thing. And it was when I started seeing that like the open source models were getting better and better, that, you know, the concept of building Venice really became obvious, because two years ago, the open source models were not nearly as good as ChatGPT. You could play around with them and they were interesting, but like they were obviously not competitive. And now they're very much in the same ballpark, and the open source models are sometimes winning in certain ways, even more than the closed source.
Yeah, I feel like it's so close now. It's like a horse race. Like this group just came out with a new one and that one is slightly ahead. But I got to be honest, at some point, like it's like the iPhone. At first, the updates to the phones were pretty big and the things were getting better and better. And now it's just like a new iPhone and the camera is a little bigger. You know, like I feel like we're already at a point where there's so much parity. Now you should be choosing on privacy and on, you know, like non-censorship and actually getting interesting information and real truthful information, and not just information that they send you. Because it sounds like, from what I've learned, is the more a question is asked, especially if it's a touchy subject, you're saying with a lot of these closed source ones, yes, OpenAI, ChatGPT does its thing, then you've got the humans in the room like typing stuff, and they're massaging, is a kind word, the answers to human biases.
Yeah. It's a big problem. Interestingly, like, unfortunately, people don't care about privacy as much as they say they do. You know, like if you ask someone on the street if they care about privacy, they'll almost always say yes. But what you really care about is like, are they willing to change their behaviors in order to become more private? And empirically, people are really not. empirically people go for fast and easy. All else equal, they prefer privacy, but they will sacrifice that immediately if it means something slightly faster or more convenient. So like we've recognized that with Venice, that, you know, the privacy angle is never going to be the selling point that gets someone to change. What does get people to change, though, is that when they type something in to ChatGPT and they get back an answer that they can tell is obviously doctored, obviously biased, it's insulting. First of all, they feel insulted. They're like, who did this? What are they trying to? Why are they treating me like a child?
Yeah.
They might be outraged that the information is wrong, or they might just feel like it's being so biased that it's kind of embarrassing. But they feel that, and there's like an emotional aversion to it. And when they use Venice and they ask the same question and they get an answer that's like much more reasonably balanced, that's really what gets people to change their behavior. So that's been an interesting thing.
So with Llama 3 and Meta, you know, I one of my companies, and we're slowly getting out of this because it's getting so painful, is to do digital marketing, you know, on Google, on Facebook and whatnot. And the amount of rules that get slapped on you for those things, and the difficulty they make it just to try and advertise that platform's crazy. So my point is Meta and Facebook with the last election doesn't exactly have the best track record. As far as open sourcing Llama for everybody, I mean, I know it's the best. I heard it's the best. Should we be concerned at all that Facebook Meta is behind this, who has a terrible track record of censorship?
So I don't think that Meta is releasing this frontier model out of some ideological commitment to openness. Maybe, but I'm not assuming
the
it.
Light.
Yeah, you know, maybe. Much more pragmatically, from a game theory perspective, Meta just has an incredibly huge amount of like servers to train models on, just sitting around that they can use. First of all, and two, their big competitors are getting into the AI space, and Meta sees this as a way of undercutting their competitors at a relatively low marginal cost for themselves. So from a business strategy perspective, it totally makes sense what they're doing. But no one can or should assume that Meta will keep releasing these large open source frontier models. Like they are expensive to train, and they will become increasingly legally contentious. The moment that it becomes too legally contentious to release such a model, Meta will not do it anymore. So hopefully that falls far enough in the future that people can use alternatives, which will require like decentralized training. And so like if you're in the open source decentralized AI world, like the real key that needs to get unlocked is for decentralized permissionless training. If that can be done with reasonable efficiency, then we can all feel pretty good about the future, but we're not quite there yet. So we need to keep hoping that Zuckerberg continues his work.
If they get pressure to pivot, do we at least get to use whatever model we have now as the base, or would we literally have to start over with a new decentralized system?
Great question. So I'll answer it in two ways. One is the what can we do question, and the other is what are we legally supposed to do according to like terms of the agreements.
Can we hard fork?
Different questions. So what can we do when the model is released? It is out there forever, right? You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like there's nothing that Meta could do to stop people from using this new Llama 3.1 and any derivation of it. So by releasing it essentially has set a new foundation for society, that like open source AI for the world will never be worse than this level, right? They might not release another one and may not get better than that level, but at least that level is always going to be available and open to everyone. So that's great. Now, in terms of the other question, like what are we supposed to legally do if Meta was like, you can't use our model anymore? I don't know, but it would be a useless gesture because people could use it without them knowing, and you can, because these are open source, you can like permutate them into other things. So I'm not too worried about that.
Cool. So we're off to a good start, is what you're saying. Disco, I know I've hogged the mic, and you're like you've had like 9 questions on your lips. What do you
No,
got?
I'm good. I think it's fascinating, Eric, when you point out that like the censorship or the bias is kind of the motivator right now. But I really think that people aren't really understanding like the intimacy that they're going to develop with what they're sharing with the AIs as they keep coming. So I do think that privacy will at some point become, super, to the forefront of thought on that, because it's really this kind of push and pull on that side of it. So that fascinates me. I guess I'd want to ask, we're trying to be advocates for decentralization overall. And, we're trying to figure out like, what can people who really believe and kind of see this, what can we be doing, and what should we be kind of, looking to kind of move towards in terms of just trying to, kind of spread the awareness of what's to come? Because it's really, people think it's, oh, you're so early or whatever, but not really. Like, it's happening and it's coming soon. So is there any thoughts on what we can do to kind of help to galvanize folks to, start, banging the drum on this behalf?
Well, you could cover the topic on your live Twitter Spaces and things like that.
We should do that. What are we doing? Why are we just talking here?
I think just
are we live?
Talking and showing people is really the thing, right? Like the best way of getting people interested in Bitcoin wasn't ever really like sitting down for an hour and discussing the ideological merits of it, but it was actually just to send someone like $10 of Bitcoin, and if it went to $11 later, they would be hooked. And sadly, that's always been the best way, actually, of spreading it is just through that. So I think just like showing people it was that. And then when someone's like, oh wow, I just made $1 for free, for some reason their brain chemistry changes and they want to learn about the thing that just made them money, and then they will be much more eager to hear all these cool ideological reasons for what they have. I think with AI, it's largely just, again, about showing people the alternatives. ChatGPT is still very new. There's a ton of people in the world that still don't use it for much stuff. It's still like a novel item. And certainly alternatives to it are even more new and less common. So just showing people how these open source tools work and that kind of thing, I think, is all you got to do, really.
Yeah, I think you nailed it as far as like with Bitcoin, just like the privacy. You as we onboard all the normies and we cross that chasm to just mainstream America and mainstream world, the hardest thing is like, how do you get the ethos that you and like I said, Andreas and Trace and all the early folks kind of, and Satoshi and Hal and all these guys taught us as we pass it along. I you want everyone to know and care, but you're right with privacy. Like, if privacy really mattered, then we'd all be sitting here fighting for Monero or Zcash, right? Like, where you have ring signatures and stuff super secure. So with AI, without number go up technology, it sounds like you're saying it's just finding that use case in your first aha moment of like crazy guy with hair and ice cream cone and like a picture of Donald Trump, which I wanted a picture of Trump eating an ice cream cone, so I could etch it in my bench in my backyard. But just the proof is in the pudding, and getting real good information, whether it's historical facts and data or current stuff. But to be like censored at every turn. Like I said, what amazes me most is how quickly it happened this year. And it was right around the time you launched Venice. And it just like on a dime, you could not talk about or ask certain things, and it just puked. And I was going to pull up the screen and show examples, but maybe this is just fortuitous, but ChatGPT right now, at least for me, maybe they know I'm doing a podcast with our huge audience, but it didn't work. It's down. Venice.ai, everybody is not down. Venice.ai is working just fine.
Well, that's good. We had a crazy traffic flood the last few days, so I'm glad to hear that.
I saw your thing there. So we just have a couple minutes left with you, Eric. Any advice in terms of Venice.ai in like, I know there's God mode and they're setting up prompts to, what advice would you give people to get the most out of Venice, to use it the best with either of those or something else? Or do you want me to ask it a question just to show off some of its
so it,
fortitude?
yeah. So from the highest level, it's used essentially for three things: doing like text chat with AI, doing image generation with AI, and doing code development with AI. Each of those categories has different models that you can use. And the first thing to try is just, do the same question, but with more than one model and see the differences in them. So right now, the two main ones for text are the News Theta, which is web enabled, and then the Llama 3.1 405B. The News Theta web enabled is very fast and is connected to the web, which means like if you ask a question that requires current information, like, oh, I heard there was an assassination attempt on Trump, that's the model that will be able to like scan the internet and give you answers of relevant things back. The Llama 405B model doesn't have web access, so you would not want to ask it about something recent. But it's trained on essentially like the whole corpus of human knowledge, and it is a more intelligent model. So if you're trying to get like a higher quality writing or a more interesting conversation on a fascinating topic, the 405B model will be slower, but it's generally better quality. So switching between those two is important when you want to use them. In terms of like the image generation, each model is quite different. Flux is the new one that we just added to image generation, and it is really like the best ever.
Nice.
It is cutting edge. Like it's as good as Midjourney, which has always been better than any of the open source stuff. And finally, now with this Flux release, like open source image generation is truly competitive. You can play around with different styles, and really just like experiment with it. This is like a new tool, so play around with things, understand how it works. And then what I've found myself doing is often just using this as my like search engine. If I have a question, like I'm traveling right now, so if I have a question on a place I'm in, I'm gonna open Venice and just ask it for something, because I don't get bombarded with a bunch of ads and the response is faster. So just purely like, regardless of privacy, regardless of censorship, like just using that as a search engine is really, really cool and convenient. So that's the quick overview.
There you go. So I showed you guys earlier in the show on ChatGPT, OpenAI, Dolly, not just showing me a guy with crazy hair, which is partially accurate, but it's only maybe 1/67th partially accurate of eating an ice cream cone. And I put in Venice in a boat, and I actually do have a prompt that I picked one of these cool, like more black and white sketches. And Eric, I don't know if you know this, but since Disco and I, basically since I got Venice Pro, we've been using your images for our topics of conversation at the top, and we've
Cool.
absolutely just loved it. But I didn't even know about Flux. I hadn't seen this one, but
Flux
this
went
is a
up like a
W.
week ago. Flux is absolutely amazing, especially for like photorealism. So if you go to the styles and you click like if you click none for the style to just get back to like normal, and you try to do like a photorealistic something, it's really amazing what it can do. So in the future we will add an API so that people can access this stuff algorithmically, and that'll be our next big thing. And then always trying to stay at the cutting edge of the models that are available, and just scaling this up in such a way that people can be private and uncensored and interact with intelligence from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Disco, do you have anything else for Eric before we say
No,
goodbye?
I appreciate the time, but I really just appreciate, building this and alerting it, because, it just, obviously light bulb. And as you say, once people kind of, see that and experience it, I know my son was all over chat. And once I told him, it's like, dude, you want them having that stuff? He got so scared. He's like, I deleted it right away. I got Venice. And it's like, so I really do think that it's really just about awareness. And, once they start riding that bike, they're like, dude, this is so awesome. And it comes that way. So I just really want to thank you for your efforts on this. And it really, it really lit a fuse just within my own psyche of like, being tuned into this and making sure that we can do whatever we can from our little small part of the globe to have an impact. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. It's been a good discussion. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. It has been a treat. So everybody definitely check out Venice.ai. If you get the pro version, it's like, what is it, $49 a year? I mean, it's literally nothing.
Yeah.
You get the pro version, and that will give you better search. Now that they're getting more congested, you kind of get first dibs on your searches, and the watermarks on all the pictures and images do not have Venice on it. Although the watermark actually does look pretty cool. So if you use it in your podcast, have the Venice logo on there so they know where they got it. But it's a no-brainer, and you can pay with crypto. I think I paid with ETH, but you can pay with ETH, Bitcoin. You can pay with both of those, Eric? Can you pay with any other cryptocurrencies or dirty fiat?
ETH, Bitcoin, Lightning, obviously fiat through a Stripe credit card. All the main ones.
Awesome. Well, Eric, appreciate your time, everybody. I don't know if we gave any financial advice, but you have to do a disclaimer. There was no financial advice in here. But with that said, Eric, appreciate you, and take care, everyone. Go check out Venice.ai, privacy, security, and actually getting questions answered that are relevant and totally true and not re-censored. So take care, everybody, and thanks, Eric.
Thanks.